I'm gonna invite first Oliver here on stage for this special setup what we have. Oliver, so maybe a big warm applause to Oliver. So Oliver, you are actually a board member of the Tech Leadership Summit. We met last year as you were keynoting here at the conference. And you spent 14 years at Google.
Yeah.
And now you moved on to Coda. Can you maybe just tell me why? Why did you do that?
Why I moved on to Coda?
Yeah.
I think we'll touch on it in this discussion as well, but 14 years is, frankly, it's too long to do anything. Yeah. I'd say basically 14 years is 4 years too long.
Yeah. But you started here in Zurich at Google first.
Yeah.
So welcome back. And please take it from here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be here. And now I have the honor of basically asking Alex, who is standing over there and who is the CEO of WeTransfer, was the CEO of the German media company Join before, and before that, he was at Google. Actually, given that we talked about leaving Google, Alex is one of the few people who left Google twice.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that in a second as well. And now he's here. Disclaimer, we worked together too long time ago.
While I left Google, of course.
While we were both at Google here in Zurich. And yeah, so the way we're going to do this, you have seen the barcode. There was a barcode. Would be good to get that up again, because if you're basically scanning the if you're basically following the instructions with the barcode, you can basically add questions, which will then show up on this iPad. That's why I'm holding it here. And I'll try to weave your questions into the discussion. So if something comes up, I'll try to do my best job of trying to read the questions, ask questions myself. I've prepared a whole bunch of questions, but of course it's going to be more interesting from you if you get your own questions answered. So with that setup, let's get going. So Alex, why don't we actually start in chronological order, then we don't get confused. So I think we'll talk about the US later, but we're in Europe. Let's start in Europe. If I'm not mistaken, you were born in Bulgaria, and that's also where you had your first enterprise.
Yeah.
So how was your life as a teenager and your relationship to technology growing up in Bulgaria?
Yeah. I'm Bulgarian. Grown up and raised basically in Bulgaria. It's interesting because I didn't even know a lot about technology. I grew up as part of the communist regime and the transition afterwards, which was, let's say, not very technologically focused. But at some point, there was a bank that went bankrupt, and my dad somehow managed to bring a computer at home. I don't know how he swindled that one up. But that was literally the only thing that kept my attention for more than 5 to 10 minutes. So I found that world entirely fascinating. Started getting really good at recognizing when the dial-up modem was actually going to connect to the internet, and start spending a lot of time on it. And basically got fascinated by the technology and taught myself to code. Found out that not many people can do that, and not many people knew what that was. So ended up seeing opportunities here and there to help people get on the internet, whether that's companies or people. That led to one thing led to another, and I started my first company. That was a service company, helping companies build their web platforms. And it was all self-taught, so no mentors, no knowledge, just a lot of grit and a lot of mistakes along the way.
Great. And before we do the transition to Google and the first parts of your career, if you think back of your worldview of technology, as you just shared, growing up in communist Bulgaria, and compared to your view now, what's changed? What's the same?
Yeah, I would say a lot has changed. People say don't work your passion because it's going to become a job, and that's what happened. Technology used to be this magnificent thing that I couldn't wait to wake up to read about, and now it's just means to an end to help solve a problem, to build something interesting. So that kind of novelty wore off quite quickly. But what is left is this fascination with the magical element of technology, seeing something for the first time that's new, seeing how it works, seeing what problem it solves, and that ingenuity constantly keeps you on your toes. And that kind of kid-like fascination with technology is still there. But yeah, now it's just a job in many ways, and it's a means to an end.
So now I just got a whole lot of questions added here.
Oh, excellent.
I'll tease you up with a longer question, and then I'll scan and try to weave in the questions here. So if we move on from Bulgaria, you joined Google. Tell us how that felt, when that was. I think it was very early on. How that felt.
Yeah. Well, imagine this kid from Bulgaria landing in a place that I will say it's the middle of nowhere in Missouri. There's a person in the audience who knows that place very well because I met her 21 years there ago. I went to college in a small town in the Midwest, and then when I finally kind of had to pick a job, I applied to Google on a whim, and somehow they said yes. So I found myself as a very young, excited, naive person landing in New York City, starting to work for the #1 company back then in 2007. It felt magical. I remember walking through that office and just feeling like I'm on the top of the world. I'm in the place where things are happening, both the city and the company. I was the stupidest person in the room, which was an amazing feeling, working with some incredibly brilliant people. And the best part was it was unstructured. I walked in, they point me to my desk and said, go there, find your laptop, go there, talk to your team, and do something productive. And as a young person who is entrepreneur at heart, that was just the best setup. It's a risk-free opportunity to build something amazing. And I'll always be thankful to Google for that opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, wow, there's a lot of questions getting added. I will try to switch to the audience questions. I will weave them in. There are many on the CEO topic, so we'll let's go through a few more prepared ones, and then I promise I'll weave them in. Now Google has changed a lot since you joined. I think it's especially a lot of that unstructured, figure everything out yourself. It will feel differently today. But maybe tell us concretely, like, what did you work on?
Yeah, I started my career at Google in a very interesting position, which had an engineer in the title, which meant that I wrote code for tools. Back then, if you remember, Oliver, it was the time where we thought nobody else can build better software, so we'll build all the software in the world that we need. So I spent a lot of time building internal tools and also handing out keyboards, which was also a very fun job in my position. But at the end of the day, I focused on building internal products. Then when DoubleClick acquisition closed, I focused on working with engineering teams as a TPM to build advertising products, for which I was, for the first time, not the user, which was also a very interesting experience. And then I got a call from someone, I want to mention his name, who convinced me in a 30-minute call to pack my bags from New York and move to Zurich, which I was even surprised about. And that person sits on my right here. So I moved to Switzerland, and we did have a lot of fun trying to help people with talent build businesses on YouTube, which the day was not really an easy job. But that was one of the most amazing parts of working on YouTube, and shipping things and going home and seeing people using them on the tram was this amazing reward that you get. So, short things. And then I left Google. I came back again with the huge help of Oliver, and I worked on Google Search. So I got to see very different aspects of the company in terms of size, complexity, but also in terms of product selection.
Yeah, and in terms of execution.
Yeah. Speed. Oh, yeah. That's a given. Yeah.
Maybe explain to the audience on how much faster execution was.
When I joined Google, we were about 10,000 people. When I finally left Google for the second time, I think we were 200,000, something like that. At YouTube, you sat in a room, you talked about it, you went back, and within 2 days you built it. When I went back to California with Google Search, it was more about completely the reverse, speak for 3 weeks and then try to build it before somebody stops you. So it's a very different business, a very different type of setup, a lot more bureaucratic, as you will, with complexity. It's a very different company, so I'm sure you had the same experience at some point.
Exactly, yeah. Actually, let me now switch to some of the audience questions. A bit out of order. Thank you. There's a voting mechanism in the tool, as some of you have discovered, that helps sorting the increasingly long list. So as we're kind of getting to the end of the Google thing, and actually no, let's do one more thing, and then I'm going to ask the top question here. That will flow more nicely. So the as I mentioned earlier, you have left Google twice, and we did not just once. There's a lot of ex-Googlers at the conference, probably in this room right now, and maybe a lot of people who are kind of at Google right now. What was the good advice can you give someone, and it doesn't have to be Google specific, and if you're basically doing the same thing in the same company for a longer time, how do you actually figure out that it's time to leave and do something else?
It's a great question. I think the benefit of Google, at least when we were there, I think you were in the same boat, is that I think I had about 10 jobs in 3 different locations in different type of job categories within the company. So I felt that there was always a progression, that I was learning, I was stretching myself, I was doing interesting things. But I remember the final time leaving, we had a small team that had an idea of how to keep Google Search competitive and ended up becoming a pillar of Google Search strategy. And I remember sitting in Charlie's, watching this OKR session, and just realizing that I've become too complacent. I was not learning, I was just cruising. I felt that it was a lot about talking rather than building, and I felt that I was missing that part of what made me happy in my professional career. So I literally walked out of that OKR session and said, okay, that's it. I need to change. And I need to change soon because I feel like I have a lot more to go and learn and a lot more to go and build. And I felt that I was not doing that at Google.
By the way, it was quite similar for me. I noticed that we always hate when you're sitting in a meeting and you have a great idea, you're excited, and someone says, oh, we tried this before. We tried this twice before and it doesn't work. And at one point in time, I realized that I had become that person. I caught myself saying that.
Oh, wow.
And that was literally for me the wake-up moment of, okay, I've been doing this for too long. Time to do something else. So let's tackle some of the audience questions. Let's start with the top voted one. Thank you, Adam. Is it even possible for a young engineer or product manager to climb right to the top in this saturated IT environment?
Yes. It is possible. I will only talk out of my experience. Is that the biggest progression I saw in my career? I would say in the past the first 5 years was when I was taking risks and trying new things. And I don't know if you can make the argument that it's very competitive now, so that's a bit difficult. But on the other hand, every day I talk to very ambitious companies doing crazy things. And sometimes it's a bit difficult to say I'm going to go leave a company X where I feel very secure, where I have good opportunities, where I'm progressing, and take a leap somewhere outside. So the answer is yes, but you have to go and find a path that is perhaps the risk-reward ratio is bigger, but ultimately it's something that you feel uncomfortable with. The moments where you stretch yourselves are the moments where you will grow the most. And I find myself jumping disproportionately upwards after leaving Google and taking a risk on a company that's perhaps too young, that I can bring things to the table and I can distinguish myself. So yes, you can. You have to be sure you want it. That's the other aspect, I would say, because it's all glamorous to be these big jobs, but they take a toll. So you have to really find out what motivates you and what's your risk appetite. And if you can combine those two things, I think it's still possible. There's a lot of new... We're also in the technological precipice now of change, and that is always a time for great opportunity if you seize it. But I'll argue that it probably won't come from a massive company where the political aspects of the business will be a bit more difficult to navigate in the short term.
Yeah. And it's a perfect segue to join, because when you left Google the second time, you left basically, you had become a product manager. You left Google behind and moved continents at that time and went back to Europe to join a company that at least I hadn't heard of at that point in time. Tell us about that while I'm sorting through the next question.
Well, I got the we came up with the name, so I'll be surprised if you did. But this is exactly what I mean. When I decided to leave Google and wanted to come back to Europe, I did what every smart Google person would do when searching for a new job. I called Meta and Amazon, and then applied. Luckily enough, I got offers for both, and really realized at some point that I'll be just doing the same job with a different color badge. And at some point, I was very lucky that I had a conversation with Alexandar, who basically said there is this crazy opportunity to come and be employee number one in a business that was just formed, that has some ambition, but they don't know how to structure a product-driven business, and you can try to make it work. And this is, it spoke to me. It spoke to me back to the times when I was an entrepreneur. It spoke to me about being more horizontal. I saw opportunities to learn things, to build teams, to shape it the way I wanted. And that just made the decision very easy. And I will not lie to you, it was incredibly difficult. The biggest learnings and the biggest stress in the first 2 years of Join. But once you see the ball starting to roll and the results coming in, you cannot beat that feeling. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I can imagine. Going back to the leaving a new job, and then we'll go to the second part of that, the CEO part. But let's first leave with the leaving. There's an audience question. What are the things you think are needed to prepare yourself to leave a job and to start a company? A business plan or conviction about the idea or the team? And to what extent?
Yeah, if you're starting a company, it has to be something that you're deeply, deeply passionate about. And I say that with full realization how cheesy it sounds. But ultimately, it's so difficult to grow a business that if you don't have that passion and you're not waking up every day with the desire to solve that problem, you're going to probably burn out somewhere along the way. You have to surround yourself quickly with few people who share that passion with you and you can lean on, and just quickly realize that it takes a village to build anything. So I don't think you need to be particularly ready. Nobody feels ready to start a business. Nobody feels ready to have kids. Nobody feels ready to get into a partnership. The reality is you make yourself ready once you do it. And I've noticed that for many folks, is taking the first step is always the most difficult. And once you start walking, it doesn't matter how treacherous the path is. You just keep pushing forward. So I wouldn't overthink it. Of course, caveat to that is depends what your situation is. You may have a family, financially, etc., etc. It has to work. But suspend your fear for a second and take the first leap. Because most likely what will happen, and I have to thank Oliver for that, you realize that there's always a way to go back. I remember when I first told him I was leaving and I was a bit nervous. He's like, oh yeah, if you don't like it, just come back. 6 months from now, it's fine. Just come back, check out how it is, and then come back. And that just gave me such an amazing, thing to fall back to. So I don't think I ever thanked him. But you'll find that there's always a way to get back. Going forward is where the benefit is.
This is actually a pretty general piece of advice. If you're doing a good job at a company and you're not fired and it's you leaving a good job behind, the risk is smaller than you intuitively think, because there's growing demand in our profession. It's not a shrinking industry. Yeah, there's always that job or a very similar job, probably in the very same location. Yeah, and possibly at a better salary available. So the risk that often people worry about, if you're analytical about it and consider the type of industry we're in, it's often it's just way smaller than people think.
And you'll be surprised how many people will help you, even without asking.
Yeah.
Try to take that first step.
Now, there's another audience question, now going to the CEO part more. If you think back your time back then, or if someone wants to follow a similar path, what skills are most valuable for becoming a CEO? Technical skills, people management, business, finance, leadership, other stuff. And where would you recommend to, our audience is product managers and engineers. So where should they invest first and most?
So in terms of a skill set, I don't think there's a prescription there for you to follow. I think one of the biggest learnings for me as I climbed that ladder was around the need to be adaptive. Basically, adaptability is the key thing. So if you're coming from a particular area and that's your strong suit, that's great. Bank on that. But ultimately, constantly challenge yourself to be adaptable, because everything changes and the things around you change. When I first took the reins of Join, I didn't know. I mean, I had a little bit of a knowledge about accounting and finance and things like that, but you'll be surprised how quickly you can fill those gaps with the right people. But ultimately, do you have a view of where you want to go, and can you convince other folks to come and follow you on that journey? In terms of actual skill set, what I'll say is that the biggest ability that you can kind of develop that I think you can scale, because being a CEO of a company of 10 people is very different than being a CEO of a company of 1,000 people, and depends on the scale. If you have the ability to go deep into a problem and get your hands dirty, but then always find a way to go back and see the forest for the trees, I think you probably will be successful. The biggest challenge is when people get stuck in one or the other. If you get stuck in just big vision and never care about the details, you find yourself basically losing the ability to steer the ship. And vice versa, if you find yourself to be the hero every single time because you're deep into the trenches and you're solving that problem, well, that means that you cannot scale. So that ability to go up and down is how I see a lot of folks get stuck when they even climb ladders at places like Google, is where you cannot switch between being the hero and being the person who kind of enables the heroes. So that's a skill set that I'll try to practice if I was in any of the shoes, or I was starting it again a lot earlier than that. Because we all love technology. I'll just go build it and it's going to work. And if it's not working, I'm going to go in and I'm going to fix it. That gets you to here. And if you want to go here, that doesn't scale.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Let's go to the opposite, because the top voted audience question right now is, what's the worst advice that you ever gave or have received? That's a tough one.
I don't know if it was an advice that I received, but it was a pit trap, a huge trap that I think I was very close to falling, and I see a lot of folks falling, especially as they get into these executive roles, which is, I'm the executive now. I have to be making decisions. I have to look strong. I have to know what is happening. I tell people what to do. The reality is that that's rarely the case. And if you're doing that, you're, again, probably making a lot of mistakes. And being a C-level doesn't necessarily mean you are powerful and in control and just barking orders. It's about realizing what's missing in a puzzle and trying to fill that puzzle, whether that's people, whether that's technology, whether that's niche, competitive advantage, positioning, etc. So don't fall into that trap. And if you read books or look at movies, it's the big shot with the big office, makes all the calls, everybody's afraid from them. And that literally is the worst thing you can imagine, because I can bet a lot of money that none of you wants to work for a person like this. So don't become that kind of person. So that's a mistake that I see a lot of folks doing. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that anybody gave me a terrible advice. Maybe because I didn't really ask in the beginning, and that's probably my fault. I would have loved to get some good advice and some bad advice, but at least some advice early on. But yeah. I would say that.
And now you're passing it on.
Yeah, well. Okay.
There's one more question I want to ask here, and then I think it's time we'll switch to the WeTransfer time. But this is more about like the planning horizon of your career. So how much did you think of your career path, and I interpret the question as like longer term planning and where you end up in 10 years, versus focused on the best possible work at the moment of in time? So how much did you plan ahead? How much did you just try in each moment of time make the best possible decision?
I think I did subconsciously exactly what Google does in many ways with these moonshots. Ever since I was a founder at the age of 17, I always knew I wanted to run a company. I don't know why, don't ask me why. I didn't have a lot of people to look up to why that's good, but I wanted to run a business. That was as much planning as I did. Everything else for me was about how do I acquire the most diverse experience, and how do I acquire the most diverse battle scars from doing difficult things. I find that if I make a plan that's more than a year or two in advance, I probably will change it 100% of the time. If you asked me 6 years ago if I'll be the CEO of a file sharing company, I probably would have told you no. Why would I do that? But it turned out to be one of the most rewarding experiences ever. So I've always chased the difficult choices and the experience and the risk rather than the safety. With always in the mind of, I want to be there, I just don't know the path. I don't know. I've seen some other people's paths, but I don't know what mine is. I'll just try to navigate and try to change and take risks. And acquire more knowledge and try to shape it a bit later in my career. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time thinking about planning, but rather doing.
Yeah. I think that's also really good advice. So now let's
Just to finish on that question, I think that there was a second part of this. How much do you focus on doing now? I would say that any step of the way, and I got that advice actually for somebody at Google early on, is people always want to be at the next thing already, but you have to become undeniable in the thing you are right now. So I would focus. I'll take this risk if I were in my shoes again, but I always try to be the best I could in that particular aspect of it. And if you can do that, I think you'll generally have a successful career, even if you don't get to that particular North Star that you should at.
Yeah. You'll also have much better job satisfaction
Yeah.
if you aim for that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the why you left Join, how the transition to WeTransfer worked. Why did you do that? You started WeTransfer. You went back a bit more to the roots. You started as CTPO.
Yeah. It was a really interesting transition. Join had done really incredibly well. We had massive expansion plans to go across Europe. Things were going well, and then COVID hit, and my funding basically dried up. And as for those of you who play in the content game, especially in production and things like that, you know how much you depend on fresh capital to continue to build great content, to purchase great content. So we were just ahead of the curve on burning. And we did very well, 10% market share in Germany after about a year and a half in the market against Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney+. But at some point, COVID shook the ability of our shareholders to fund it. And they wanted to scale it back to become just a German entity, which we were already a German entity.
Yeah.
So it required a very different setup of a business. It required to be probably acquired by one of the shareholders. So we built all these plans, but at that point, they didn't need a growth product-led CEO to integrate something into a broadcaster. So we shook hands. I left. I found my successor. And then my non-executive chair of the board of Join was actually on the board of WeTransfer. And he said, why don't you come and explore this amazing business? And the more I got to know the business, the more I got excited. And I had a very candid conversation with the CEO, whom I give a lot of credit, who basically said, listen, I've been around here for 4 or 5 years. The next phase of growth of this business is product-led growth, and that's not my strong suit. So I'm looking for someone to kind of be my successor. And in that discussion, what became apparent to me is that the company was structured not as a tech company, but more as a media company. And I joined as a CTPO to give myself the opportunity to focus on restructuring the organization on engineering and product and make that a good machine before I take the reins of the business. And we did just that. About a year I restructured the business, I scaled the tech and product, and I eventually took the reins.
Yeah. Now I know we have a minute or so left. We have a minute left, so we'll try to get to that. I want to kind of weave in the last top voted audience question as well, but if you can try to, in a minute, tell us, like, I know WeTransfer is a story that some people might know, others not, an IPO, and then recently an acquisition. So what's next for WeTransfer? What can probably users in the audience expect?
Yeah. So a little caveat to that thing that you're reading up there, perhaps with my name on it, is that I am the CEO of WeTransfer for another couple of months. We ran a process this year and sold the business to a company called Bending Spoons. I firmly believe the commitment from Bending Spoons is to keep the product and what makes WeTransfer special as in the community of creative professionals alive. So I don't think the product is going anywhere. I presume that there will be a lot of interesting developments. But the business is in the hands of others now. And they, I'm sure, will drive it to new heights. And yeah, it was a process over the last few years where we tried to go public, which, I don't recommend for people to scale and try to go public at the same time. It's nice if you can kind of segment those things. And unfortunately, we won the Worst Timing Award because we tried to go public 3 days before the first rate hike back in 2022, which for those of you who have experience with that meant that we were trying to convince investors to invest in a time where NASDAQ was going -10, -10, -10, which is not really the most beautiful moment to do so. But the company didn't depend on that. We were profitable, we were growing, so we just put our heads down, continue to pedal forward, and continue to grow. And luckily, 3 years later or so, we had an opportunity to execute a transaction and sell the business.
Awesome. Now we're at the end of time. We didn't get through all the audience questions, for that is just simply too many, but I hope you got good advice. You'll be around, so we'll be hanging out here or at the coffee machine or knowing Alex at the bar. So you'll have the opportunity to ask more questions.
Thank you, everyone.